People think walls are built to keep others out. But sometimes, a wall isn't protection. It's a message. Mine said, "I am done being silent." The morning my iron wall stood complete, the neighborhood buzzed like a stirred hive. Curtains shifted. Phones clicked photos. Some neighbors nodded respectfully. Others, especially HOA loyalists, whispered like I had declared war. In a way, I had. By noon, 3 HOA board members stood at the edge of my lawn, staring at the wall like it was alive. Charles Whitman hadn't shown up yet. No, he waited for the finale. But Linda Parker was front and center, red-faced and pacing like a loaded gun. "He has no right," she hissed. "He fabricated boundaries," muttered Harold, another board member. "This is a violation of 'I opened my door and stepped out.'" They froze. We stared at each other in cold daylight. "You'll receive official notice," Linda said, her voice trembling with indignation. I nodded calmly. "Make sure it's accurate this time." The way her mouth clenched, that small victory was worth it. But by the following morning, the game changed. A police cruiser parked in front of my home. And this time, Officer Daniels wasn't alone. A second officer stepped out. And behind them, Charles Whitman. It in perfect suit, perfect posture, perfectly fake concern. I stepped outside as they approached. Charles spoke before I could. "Michael, we're here to resolve a situation. Legally." Officer Daniels looked uneasy. "Mr. Reed, the HOA claims unauthorized construction and obstruction of development property." Development property. They were using that phrase now. Not shared, not easement. Development. They were claiming ownership out loud. I folded my arms. "Do they also claim they have a deed signed by me?" Charles smiled that rehearsed smile. "The paperwork speaks for itself." I held up a folder. "Then let it speak in court." He blinked. "I filed a fraud report," I continued quietly, "with county records, including your forged signature of mine. Shall I show the officers?" Officer Daniels exchanged a look with his partner. Charles recovered quickly. "This is a misunderstanding. Mr. Reed is confused." I stepped closer, voice steady. "I'm many things, Charles, but I am not confused." Yes. You could hear the wind brush against the iron wall behind me. Officer Daniels cleared his throat. "This is turning into a civil dispute. We can't enforce removal of the wall unless there's a court order." Linda, who had just arrived, nearly exploded. "What? It violates guidelines." The second officer turned. "Ma'am, HOA guidelines aren't state law." That hit her like a slap. She went silent. They didn't win that day, neither did I, but I saw it, a fissure in their confidence. They came with law. I countered with truth. That evening, David walked over, hands in his pockets. "That wall is all over the neighborhood group chat," he said. "Half the neighbors think you're a hero. The other half think you've lost your mind. Which half are you in?" I asked. He smirked. "The half that brought you dinner." He handed me a takeout bag. "Real friendships don't ask questions. They bring food." As we sat on my back porch, glancing at the newly built wall, he asked quietly, "What if they drag you to court?" I didn't flinch. "Let them. Court means evidence, records, discovery." He nodded slowly. "You're not just fighting them." "No," I said. "I'm exposing them." 2 days later, it came, HHOA special hearing, mandatory attendance. A certified letter, stamped in bold red. They were summoning me like a criminal. Most people fear that kind of letter. Intimidation is their first weapon. Fear is their strongest rule. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Emily pressed her palm against mine. "Whatever happens, don't go alone." "I won't," I said, because I wasn't walking into that meeting empty-handed. Inside my folder were copies of the forged transfer, proof of my property boundaries, contact from the County Fraud Division, something more powerful than all of that. My story. The night of the hearing, the HOA Center was packed. Residents filled the folding chairs, whispering. Some looked curious, others judgmental. At the front table sat the board, Charles at the center, Linda far right, Harold and two others flanking them like judges. A woman in glasses, the appointed moderator, opened with a gavel tap. This hearing will address unauthorized construction and resident misconduct. Misconduct. Interesting. Charles leaned forward, hands folded. Michael, we are here to give you a chance to correct your actions. I stood, calm, composed. With respect, I said. I'm here to correct yours, murmurs rippled across the room. Linda slammed her pen down. You built an illegal structure. It's on my land, I replied. She sneered. Land you no longer own, I lifted a paper. Signed, supposedly by me? Charles intervened, gently patronizing. Michael, mistakes in paperwork can— Forgery, I corrected. Call it what it is. The room went dead silent. I raised the document high enough for everyone to see. This transfer was filed without my presence, without my consent, and with my forged signature. Which is why the county has placed a legal hold on your development. Gasps. Someone in the back whispered, Forgery. Another, is that true? Linda's face drained. Charles stayed still. Too still. I looked them all in the eye. You tried to erase my backyard, my property, my home. You planned to profit from it, and you did it behind every resident's back. I let that sink in. Then I lowered my voice. This isn't just about me. If they can do it to me, they can do it to you. Panic. Real, visible panic. Eyes darting, whispers growing. Charles tried one last move. We should conclude this session. No, someone from the crowd said. We want answers. It was Mrs. Johnson, elderly, soft-spoken. She'd lived here longer than any of us. She stood. Did you sell his land, Charles? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I had cracked the mask. But this was just the beginning. Because when truth appears, power shifts, and they weren't done fighting. Neither was I. People expected the wall to bring chaos. They didn't expect it to bring truth. But truth has a way of spreading. Silent at first, then unstoppable. The week after the court hearing, everything in Willow Creek changed. The HOA, once feared, was now watched. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now whispered in driveways. Some approached me, quietly, nervously. Did they really forge your signature? Is it true Charles took payments? Are we safe? Safe. That word said everything. This was no longer about property. It was about power, abused, unchecked, rotting behind bylaws and garden inspections. And that's when the unraveling began. The first resignation, 3 days after court. Harold, one of the board members, resigned publicly. A printed letter taped to the HOA office door. I cannot be part of a board facing questions of fraud. I resign effective immediately. By morning, someone had written in pen beneath it, Good, who's next? The audit. The county notified me. Due to the fraud investigation, a full audit of HOA finances was underway. Every dollar, every vendor contract, every payment to board members. Charles, once the untouchable president, now had county officials crawling through his records, and when people in power are cornered, they either fight or fracture. The threat, it was late, past midnight, when I heard footsteps outside the wall. Slow, deliberate. I stepped onto my porch and saw him, Charles Whitman, alone. He stood at the iron barrier, hands in his pockets. You've destroyed everything, he said quietly, not looking at me. No, I replied. I just stopped you from destroying others. He turned, eyes dark and hollow. You think this makes you a hero? I don't care about being a hero, I said. I care about what's right. His voice broke, bitterness bleeding through. You don't understand the deals I made. The promises. The people I owe. I stepped forward. No, Charles. You don't understand. This neighborhood never belonged to you. For a moment, I saw something I never expected. Fear. He backed away without another word. That was the last time I saw him as HOA president. The letter to the community. A week later, every mailbox in Willow Creek received an official notice. Effective immediately. Charles Whitman and Linda Parker have been removed pending investigation. Interim board leadership will be appointed. HOA operations suspended until further audit. No signatures. No explanations. They weren't stepping down. They were being taken down. The meeting that ended it. The final community meeting, this time called not by the board, but by the county, was held in the same room where I had once stood alone. Not this time. The room was full. Neighbors, reporters, investigators, and me, seated in the front row. Not fighting, watching. The county investigator stood before the crowd. Our preliminary findings confirm financial misconduct, unauthorized land transfers, and breach of fiduciary duties by multiple board members. A wave of gasps, murmurs, heads turned, eyes widened. But what came next silenced even the whispers. We have found evidence of developer payments routed to personal accounts. That was it. The board wasn't corrupt. It was criminal. Justice. Not victory some expected me to cheer, to celebrate. I didn't, because this was never about winning. It was about restoring something that had been stolen from all of us. Trust. Months passed. The investigation deepened. Lawsuits shifted, this time against the board. New elections were planned. Safeguards were implemented. One afternoon, David joined me by the wall. "You ever going to take this thing down?" he asked. I ran my hand across the cool iron. "No," I said. "It's staying," he nodded. "Symbol, huh?" I smirked. Reminder. Peace returns. But I don't forget. Emily and I planted flowers along the base of the wall, bright colors against black steel, life beside strength. Neighbors now stopped by not with questions, but with gratitude. Thank you for standing up. I never knew what they were doing. I was scared to speak. I always replied the same. You shouldn't have to be brave to be treated fairly. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat in the yard. The full yard, untouched, unclaimed, mine. I thought about everything, how they underestimated me, how they tried to break me quietly, how they forgot one simple thing. Homeowners don't just own property. We own stories, and when someone tries to rewrite ours, we fight back. I never wanted conflict. I wanted peace. But peace without justice is surrender. And I will never surrender my home. They said I waged war with a wall, but they were wrong. I won it with truth. Courtrooms have a strange silence. It isn't peaceful. It's heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath, waiting to see who will break first. The day of the first hearing, I walked in carrying one thing the HOA never expected me to bring, and Emily walked beside me, quiet but strong. David was already inside, sitting in the back row. And there, at the front table, sat Charles Whitman, Linda Parker, and the HOA's attorney, a slick man in a gray suit, scanning me the way a wolf studies prey. Charles didn't look at me. He stared forward, jaw tight. Linda, though, she smirked. In her mind, this was the day I would fold. The judge entered, a firm woman with a calm presence. She glanced at both tables. "This is Reed versus Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Cause, boundary dispute, alleged illegal construction, and contested transfer of deed." The HOA's attorney stood first, confident, polished. "Your Honor, the defendant, Mr. Reed, has erected a non-compliant, hazardous structure on property owned by the HOA. We request immediate removal and fines." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Reed?" I stood, calm, controlled. "Your Honor, I did build a wall. On my land, a land the HOA claims to own, using a deed bearing my signature. A signature I never gave." Murmurs rippled in the room. The judge blinked. "You're alleging fraud." "Yes, ma'am," I said, lifting the document. And I filed a report with the county. "The transfer is under investigation." The HOA attorney shifted. Charles stared daggers. Linda stopped smiling. "Do you have proof?" The judge asked. I nodded and opened my file. Exhibit A, my original property deed. Exhibit B, the forged transfer. Exhibit C, the county recorder's written hold due to forgery investigation. The judge examined them in silence. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to reveal. Then came the moment that changed everything. I turned slightly. "Your Honor, I'd also like to call a witness, Mrs. Eleanor Johnson," gasps. Linda stiffened. Charles finally looked at me. Mrs. Johnson stood slowly, dignified in her age, carrying a folder. The bailiff escorted her forward. The judge nodded. "Proceed," Mrs. Johnson's voice was steady. "I served on the HOA board before Mr. Whitman. I retained copies of minutes. These minutes show private negotiations with developers, including benefits offered to board members if they secured additional land." She handed the judge the documents, and, she said, glancing at Linda, "None of these meetings were disclosed to residents. You could feel it. The shift." The judge's expression hardened. She turned to the HOA table. "Mr. Whitman, do you wish to respond?" Charles stood slowly. For the first time, the Polish cracked. There were misunderstandings, agreements with forged signatures. The judge cut in. He froze. The judge leaned forward. "This case is no longer about a wall. It's about potential fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and misrepresentation." Linda looked away. The attorney scribbled frantically. Charles remained rigid, face pale. I didn't smile. This wasn't victory. Not yet. It was exposure. The judge finally spoke. "No demolition order, no fines. This matter will remain on hold pending full investigation into the HOA's conduct. Mr. Reed's wall stays. Stays. One word, one judgment." I heard someone clap softly in the gallery. Then another. Small, hesitant, neighbors. I didn't turn to see who, because my eyes were on Charles. When court adjourned, Charles approached me, lips barely moving. "You think this is over?" he muttered. I met his stare. "It's just beginning," I replied. Outside, reporters had gathered. Deputies held them back, but flashes fired. David stepped beside me. "You just took down a giant." "No," I said. I made it step into the light. That evening, I found a letter slipped under my door. No envelope. "You don't understand what they're capable of. Be careful." A friend, I read it twice. This wasn't surrender. This was warning. Later that night, Emily sat with me beside the wall, our backs against the cold iron. "You won today," she whispered. I stared ahead. Today was survival, justice. It comes next. She rested her head on my shoulder. "What if they come after us?" I exhaled slowly. "Then they'll learn," I said quietly. "Walls don't fall easily." Because I hadn't built this wall to separate. I built it to stand. To stand until truth finished what I started. People kept asking me the same question. Why build a wall? They didn't understand. The wall wasn't to block them out. It was to show them I wasn't moving. Not an inch. Not a breath, but the HOA. They couldn't tolerate defiance. 3 days after the hearing, I saw them again. Developers standing at the edge of my wall, arms crossed, whispering like vultures around a carcass that wouldn't die. They didn't approach me. They didn't speak. They just stared. That silence meant one thing. They were done talking. By noon, the certified envelope arrived. Notice of legal action. They were suing me for building an unauthorized structure, for trespassing on HOA-owned land, for interfering with approved development. Emily read over my shoulder. I felt her hand grip my arm. "Michael," she whispered. "Can they win?" I closed the letter carefully. Only if I let them. She nodded slowly, trusting me, even if she didn't yet understand the war I was preparing. The next morning, the hammer dropped. A police car rolled up. This time it wasn't Officer Daniels. It was someone new. Hard eyes, stiff posture, already annoyed to be here. And right behind him, Charles Whitman and Linda Parker. Linda wore that same bright, fake smile she used during HOA meetings. But her eyes, they flicked with triumph. "Mr. Reed," the officer began, "we're here to address an emergency complaint regarding illegal construction." Linda added sweetly, "We're simply trying to enforce community guidelines." I kept my voice level. "And I'm simply protecting my property." Charles stepped forward. "Michael, this is your last chance to remove the wall voluntarily. We can't keep this civil if you refuse." There it was. The threat. I didn't move. I didn't blink. "I filed a fraud claim on the deed transfer," I said calmly. "Any action taken on that land is currently under legal hold by the county." The new officer glanced at Charles. "Is that true?" Charles's jaw locked. "It's under dispute." "Under dispute," I repeated, "which means touching that wall is tampering with evidence." For the first time, Linda's smile flickered. The officer sighed. "This is civil, not criminal. We're done here." When they turned to leave, Linda hissed under her breath, "You think this makes you safe?" I met her eyes. "No, it makes me ready." That evening, I began my real work, not building, preparing. I sat at my dining table with 3 piles: legal documents, fraud claim, property deeds, HOA bylaws, county communications, proof of ongoing investigation, and, most importantly, witness statements, because the county clerk wasn't my only proof. I had David, and soon I had someone else too. Just after sunset, there was a knock. I opened the door to find Mrs. Johnson, the elderly woman who had challenged Charles during the meeting. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but fury. "My husband served on that board before Charles took over," she said. "I know how things used to be. This isn't leadership. This is greed." She held out a folder. "What's this?" I asked. "Meeting minutes," she said. "Ones they never filed. Developers were offering them incentives. I think that means bribes." I stared at her. "Why give this to me?" She looked me straight in the eye. "Because you're the only one not afraid of them." For the first time since this began, I felt the tide shift. This wasn't just my fight anymore. Others were quietly choosing sides. Some whispered troublemaker. Others whispered hero. I didn't need either title. I only needed truth. Days passed. The streets of Willow Creek turned into a silent battlefield. Cars slowed by my wall. Phone cameras clicked. HOA members avoided driving past my street. And on one calm, gray morning, I found something taped to the wall itself. "You'll lose." No signature. No courage. Just hate. Emily saw it. "Michael, what if this never stops?" "It will," I whispered. "Once everything hidden is dragged into the light." Court papers arrived next. A formal lawsuit. They had finally played their biggest card. Good, because I was done defending. I was about to attack. The night before the first court date, I walked the length of my wall in silence. No lights, no noise. Just the cold iron towering against the dark sky. People think a wall just divides. They forget one thing: a wall can also stand. I placed my hand on the steel. Solid. Unmoving. "They think they can make me tear this down," I murmured. Emily stepped beside me. "Will you?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm going to make them tear themselves down." They thought this wall was the end. It was only my beginning. People often imagine injustice as loud, violent, chaotic. But the worst kind of injustice is quiet. Done behind closed doors, signed with forged names, wrapped in polite smiles. That's what I was dealing with. Not thieves with masks, but neighbors in suits. After discovering the fraudulent deed, I knew one thing. I couldn't confront them empty-handed. I needed proof, not anger. Evidence wins wars. Rage only fuels them. So, I waited. I waited until the HOA held their monthly board meeting. On paper, those meetings were open to residents. But everyone knew the real decisions happened before the doors opened, behind the conference room, in whispered conversations, guarded like secrets. That evening, I arrived early. The HOA office, the spotless model home at the entrance of Willow Creek, looked almost too perfect. Trimmed hedges, fake smiles, seasonal banners reading "Community First." The hypocrisy made me sick. The main meeting hadn't started yet. I quietly slipped around the side and found a back window cracked open. I didn't plan it, but when I heard voices inside, I froze. Then I listened. Charles Whitman's voice, low and irritated. "Michael Reed is becoming a problem. He went to the county." A woman, Linda Parker, cold and sharp. "He can't do anything. The transfer is already on record. If he sues, we drown him in legal fees." Then another voice, unfamiliar, a developer, smooth, confident. "Just make sure the land's cleared. My crew starts in 2 weeks. I've already promised plots to buyers." My blood ran cold. They weren't just selling my land. They were profiting off it. Charles again. "The wall he's so protective of? We'll mark it encroaching and force him to tear it down. He'll have no case once construction begins." They laughed. That was the moment something inside me hardened. Not broke, hardened. They weren't making a mistake. They were stealing. I stepped back just in time. The back door opened and Charles stepped out with a cigarette. I stayed hidden in the shadows. I had heard everything I needed. On my way home, I wasn't angry. Anger is temporary. This was something deeper. A promise to myself. They will pay for this. The next morning, I filed an official fraud report with the county. It wouldn't be fast, but a flag was placed on the property transfer. That meant the HOA couldn't legally proceed with development until the investigation closed. It was my first move on the board. The HOA reacted swiftly. By afternoon, a white SUV slowly crawled in front of my house. Inside sat Officer Daniels, local police, and next to him, Linda Parker. I walked outside before they knocked. "Mr. Reed," Officer Daniels said cautiously. "We received a complaint about harassment and trespassing." I stared at Linda. She wasn't smiling now. "Harassment?" I repeated. Linda folded her arms. "You've been spying on board meetings, threatening members." I stepped forward, calm, controlled. "I haven't threatened anyone. But I do know about the fraudulent transfer signed in my name." Linda's face tightened. Officer Daniels glanced between us. "I have no interest in arguing," I continued. "But if anyone steps on my property again without a court order, I'll consider it trespassing." "By your standards," Officer Daniels gave a slow nod. "This seems like a civil dispute. I suggest both parties handle it legally." Linda's eyes burned with rage. She had expected me to yell, to lose control. Instead, I stood my ground, silent, unshakable. The SUV left. Linda never looked back. That night, Emily sat beside me in the living room, anxiety in her eyes. "Michael, what if they really build over it?" I took her hand. "They won't lay a single brick." "I promise." "How?" she whispered. I looked out the window, into the night, at the soft outlines of our yard. Our memories. By making it impossible, days passed. The HOA grew quiet. No letters, no smiles. They were planning their counterattack. I could feel it. Then came the notice. A final letter. Final warning. Unauthorized structures and boundary violations. Failure to comply will result in fines, mandatory removal, and law enforcement involvement. Law enforcement. They were threatening police action. Over my fence, the paper trembled in my hand, not from fear, but resolve. It was time. I called David. "Are you free tonight?" I asked. "For what?" I hesitated, then said it. "To build something." Midnight. No moon. Just floodlights from my backyard and 2 trucks parked quietly behind my house. David stepped out, eyes wide as he saw the steel beams. "Michael, what is this?" "A wall," I said simply. "A permanent line they can't cross. He stared at me. I could see the respect in his eyes, and the worry. This will start a war. It already has. As the first sparks flew from the welder, I felt something powerful. Not anger, not fear. Freedom. Brick by brick, iron by iron, I was taking back control. By sunrise, the walls stood. Black iron, tall, unbreakable. A fortress on the land they claimed was no longer mine. The HOA woke up to a sight they never expected. I didn't hide. I stood right there, coffee in hand, as neighbors stopped to stare. Linda arrived first, mouth wide. "Michael, you had no permission." I turned slowly. "I don't need permission to defend what's mine." She stormed off, shouting something about the police, emergency meetings, violations. I didn't care, because for the first time, they were reacting to me. Not the other way around, but I knew this wasn't over. They would strike back, hard, and I was ready, because I had just built more than a wall. I had drawn a line. I've heard people say that a man isn't truly tested until someone threatens his home. I never understood that, until the day I walked outside and found 2 construction workers digging in my backyard. It was a bright Saturday morning, the kind where sunlight makes everything look peaceful. I was holding a cup of coffee thinking about mowing the lawn later when I saw them. Hard hats, measuring tape, spray painting orange lines through my grass like they owned it. At first, I froze. Maybe they're lost. Maybe this was some mistake. "Hey," I called out. "Can I help you guys?" The taller one barely looked at me. "We're marking the property line." "Developer starts next week," I frowned. "Property line? This is my yard." He smirked and shook his head. "Not anymore, sir. This section belongs to Willow Creek Estates. Willow Creek Estates." My HOA, my heart dropped. I stood there, gripping my coffee so hard I thought the cup would snap. There must be a mistake. "I never sold anything." The shorter worker sighed, clearly not in the mood for conversation. "Look, buddy, talk to your association. We've got orders." And just like that, they kept painting. Orange lines. Cutting my yard in half, I felt something grow inside me. Not panic, not fear. Something colder. Anger. The kind that starts in your chest and spreads like ice. That afternoon, I marched straight to the HOA office. They operated out of a rented model home at the front of the neighborhood, painted bright white, flowers in perfect rows like a postcard of perfection. A lie in colors. Inside sat Charles Whitman, the HOA president. Immaculately dressed, silver hair, eyes like glass. "Michael!" he exclaimed, flashing a politician's smile. "What brings you in?" I didn't bother sitting. "Who gave workers permission to dig in my yard?" He blinked, slowly. Too slowly. "I'm sure it's just a boundary adjustment," he said smoothly. "The developer purchased some unused easement." Unused easement. "That's my land," I snapped. "I paid for every inch." His lips curled just slightly. "According to our records, that section was part of communal property. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about." I leaned in. "Stop them, now, or I'll get my lawyer." Charles's smile faded, only for a flicker, then returned brighter. "Let's not escalate, Michael. We're neighbors, after all. Neighbors." I left before I said something I couldn't take back. That night I sat with my wife Emily at our kitchen table. She could see it in my face. "What happened?" she asked softly. "They sold our land," I told her. "Without telling us." Her eyes widened. "Can they do that?" I didn't have an answer, and that scared me more than anything. The next morning, it got worse. I found a letter taped to my door. HOA letterhead, bright blue ink, official tone. Notice of encroachment. It has come to our attention that a personal fence may extend beyond your approved boundary line. Please remove or adjust accordingly within 14 days to avoid penalties. Penalties. For my own land. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. This was planned. I went to see my neighbor, David Miller, a good man who'd lived across from me for 10 years. When I told him what happened, he shook his head in disbelief. "Michael," I saw Charles out there last week with some developers. They were laughing, shaking hands. I thought it was odd, but he hesitated. I didn't think it involved you. Do you think they forged something? I asked. David looked grim. I think they're hiding something. Over the next few days, the HOA smiled brighter than ever. Linda Parker, board member and self-appointed rule enforcer, walked by my home with her little clipboard. She waved at me like we were old friends. "Morning, Michael. Just checking on landscaping compliance." Her smile was warm, her eyes cold, a pretty mask over something rotten. I didn't wave back. By Thursday, orange flags marked every inch of the supposed new boundary. They were preparing to build, to erase what was mine. That night, I sat alone in the backyard, the one place that had always been safe. I watched my daughter's swing set sway gently in the breeze. The thought of losing it, losing this, clawed at me. I whispered to myself, they have no idea who they're messing with. The first crack in their facade came the next day. I went to the county office. I requested the official property records. The clerk, an older woman, looked at me strangely as she printed something. "This is odd," she said. "There's a new addendum filed last month, transferring part of your parcel to Willow Creek HOA. My chest tightened. "Filed by who?" She squinted. "Charles Whitman, on your behalf, on my behalf, forged, signed, stamped." I felt my pulse in my jaw. My own signature. Faked. "Can I get a copy of that?" I asked quietly. She hesitated. "You'll need to file a fraud claim." Fraud. The word echoed in my mind. Loud. Clear. I drove home, gripping the papers so hard they crumpled. Emily met me at the door. "What is it?" she asked. I handed her the forged deed transfer. Her hand covered her mouth. "They're stealing it," she whispered. "No," I said. "They've already stolen it." And that's when I made a decision. I would not beg. I would not plead. I would build. Not just a defense. A wall. Because if the HOA wanted a war, I'd give them one.